Amara pushed the contract across the table before Michael could finish speaking. Sign it. Sign it tonight or we lose everything we've worked for. Michael stared at her, confused. The kitchen light fell across the papers, across their daughter's drawings still scattered from earlier, across the plate of jollof rice Amara hadn't touched since she saw the supplier's email at 9. It was past midnight, their daughter slept upstairs, and the man sitting across from her, the man she had chosen, the man she had lifted when no one else believed in him, looked at the contract like he'd never seen one before. I didn't realize it was this urgent, Michael said slowly. She looked at her husband, not with anger, with something quieter and far more dangerous. The look of a woman who has just understood she's been carrying something alone that was always meant to be shared. Amara was not the kind of woman who made noise. She was the kind who arrived, assessed the situation, and fixed things before anyone noticed there was a problem. She grew up the second daughter of a civil servant in Enugu, which meant she learned early that love was not just a feeling. It was a decision you made every morning when your feet touched the floor. She met Michael Ez in 2016 at her cousin's wedding in Abuja. He was the one laughing the loudest, dancing without rhythm, completely unbothered by how ridiculous he looked. Something about his unguarded joy cracked something open in her chest. She crossed the room. She introduced herself first. She already knew, even then, that she would have to be the one to move toward him, because Michael was the kind of man who waited at the edge of good things, hoping they would come to him. They married in 2018. A modest ceremony, white tent, plastic chairs, a band that played the same 4 songs. Her uncle, Chief Obi, sat in the front row with an expression that said he was reserving judgment. Michael's family arrived in matching Ankara and celebrated like the wedding was already a success. Amara danced with her husband and decided that was enough. What nobody at that wedding knew was that Michael's plumbing supplies business was barely surviving. 2 employees in a rented shop in Yaba, so small both men had to stand sideways to pass each other. A supplier debt of 80,000 naira that Michael had been quietly rotating for months. He had told her about the debt on their 4th date. She had not flinched. She simply asked to see the books. That was the moment Michael fell completely in love with her. She spent 4 nights restructuring his finances on a notepad. She identified where money was leaking. She renegotiated a payment plan with the supplier herself, calling the man on a Sunday morning with a calm authority that made Michael stand in the kitchen doorway and watch her in quiet amazement. "You didn't have to do that," he told her afterward. "I know," she said, and went back to cooking. Their daughter Zara arrived in 2019. Small, loud, already full of opinions. The house changed, not just because of the baby, but because something in Michael shifted too. A softness came over him in those early months of fatherhood, a humility that made Amara feel for the first time that they were building something real. And they were, just not in the way Michael understood. In early 2019, Amara attended a family gathering at her uncle Chief Obi's house in Akoi. Chief Obi was a senior manager at Landmark Construction, a mid-size firm that had just won several government contracts and was actively sourcing suppliers. During the meal while Michael was home with Zara, Amara mentioned her husband's business. Quietly, precisely. She knew exactly what she was doing. "He supplies plumbing materials," she said. "Quality ones," Chief Obi asked. "The best. He's reliable. He just needs one serious client to prove it." Chief Obi looked at his niece for a long moment, the way a man looks when he recognizes that the person across from him is sharper than the room. He picked up his phone during dessert and sent a single message. 4 weeks later, Landmark Construction called Michael's shop directly. The contract was worth 5 million naira in the first phase alone. Michael came home that evening shaking. He lifted Amara off the floor and spun her in the small living room, knocking a plant off the shelf, laughing like a boy. "We did it," he kept saying. "We did it, Amara." She hugged him back and smiled into his shoulder and said nothing about the lunch, nothing about Chief Obi, nothing about the quiet conversation she had over egusi soup that changed the entire direction of their lives. She just let him have the joy of it. That was her first mistake, not because she was wrong to support him, but because she let him believe the miracle had arrived on its own. Over the next year, Michael's business expanded in ways he had never imagined. 5 staff became 8. The Yaba shop got a new signboard. He bought a Honda Pilot and drove it home on a Friday afternoon with his chest so full of pride it could have burst. He stood beside the car in the compound, arms folded. "This is just the beginning, Amara. Just the beginning." Meanwhile, Amara was managing his supplier relationships from her phone. She was reconciling accounts every Sunday morning before church. She was keeping Zara fed, dressed, and loved. And she was doing it all without making a sound, because she had learned, as many women learn, that the loudest person in the room gets the credit whether they earned it or not. She was not loud. She was the foundation. And foundations do not announce themselves, they simply hold everything up. The first time Amara noticed something had shifted in Michael was not lipstick on a collar. It was not a phone turned face down. It was the way he said her name. They were at a dinner party in Lekki, one of those gatherings that smelled like new money and old pretension, where the women laughed too carefully and the men talked too loudly about things they had only half accomplished. Amara had dressed carefully that evening. Royal blue dress, gold earrings, her hair styled the way Michael once told her made him lose focus. She was standing near the window talking to another woman woman when Michael called her from across the room. Amara. Not Ara, the nickname that had been there since the 3rd month of dating when he whispered it against her forehead in the dark. Just her full name. Flat, functional. Like he was calling for a piece of furniture he needed moved. She turned, smiled, crossed the room to him, but something inside her went very still. She did not say anything that night. She filed it away in the quiet part of herself where she kept all the things she noticed but was not yet ready to name. On the drive home, Michael talked about someone's investment portfolio and a new contract he was hoping to pursue. Amara watched the city lights slide past the window, held Zara's sleeping head in her lap and breathed slowly. "That sounds good," she said, not his name with warmth, just words to fill the space where a real conversation used to live. By November 2020, the distance between them had become architectural. They lived in the same house but occupied different versions of it. Michael came home late and left early. He smelled different, a cologne she had not bought. He stopped asking how her day was, and because she had always been the one who held things together without being asked, she kept holding things together without being asked. She kept managing his supplier accounts. She kept answering emails from Landmark's procurement team when Michael was unreachable. She kept Zara's world warm and steady as her own grew cold. There was a woman Amara knew before she knew. A woman always knows. Her name was Stella. Younger, louder, the kind of beautiful that demanded to be looked at. She had attached herself to Michael's new social circle, like something decorative and intentional. Amara saw her once at a function, laughing at something Michael said, touching his arm in that particular way that has no innocent explanation. Their eyes met briefly across the room. Stella did not look away, neither did Amara. That night after Zara was asleep, Amara went to the kitchen and stood at the sink for a long time with the tap running and her hands flat on the counter. She was not crying, she was deciding. She was asking herself the question every woman eventually faces. Do I fight for this man or do I let him go and fight for myself? She prayed. She always prayed when the ground beneath her felt unsteady. She prayed quietly and fiercely, the way her mother had taught her, with her eyes open and her hands steady. She did not get a dramatic answer. She got something quieter, a deep, bone-level knowing that whatever Michael was about to do, she would survive it. She turned off the tap. She dried her hands. She went to bed. March 2021 arrived the way disasters often do, on an ordinary evening with food on the stove and a child in the next room and no warning at all. Amara was making stew. The kitchen smelled of curry and thyme, and the particular domestic warmth that she had built with her own 2 hands over 4 years. Zara was in the living room watching cartoons. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly as it always was. Michael walked in, still wearing his jacket. He did not sit down. He did not look at the food. He stood in the middle of the kitchen with his hands in his pockets. "Ara, I think we should separate." The spoon kept moving in the pot. She did not stop stirring. She said, "Okay." Michael blinked. He had clearly prepared for tears, for shouting, for the kind of scene that would let him cast himself as the reasonable one. Her stillness disarmed him completely. I feel like we've grown apart. I heard you, Michael." She turned the flame down. She turned around and looked at him with eyes so calm it frightened him. "I heard you the first time." He moved out 4 weeks later. He took his clothes, his laptop, his Honda Pilot, and the life that Amara had quietly built around him like scaffolding around a building that couldn't stand on its own. What came next was the particular cruelty of social collapse. The women who had eaten at Amara's table, who had praised her cooking and borrowed her recipes and called her every Sunday, they disappeared. Not dramatically, just gradually. The way daylight leaves so slowly you almost don't notice until it is fully dark and you are standing alone in it. Phone calls went unanswered. Invitations stopped coming. The couples that were their friends became simply Michael's friends. Because in this city, loyalty follows access to money, and the money had left with Michael. Amara packed her pride carefully, the way you pack something fragile, and she kept moving. She took a bookkeeping contract with a small trading company in Aja, then another. She structured her days around Zara. School drop-off, work, school pickup, dinner, homework, prayers, sleep. A routine so tight and disciplined it left no room for falling apart. She was not happy, but she was standing, and for now, standing was enough. What she did not know was that across the city, the structure she had quietly maintained for 4 years was already beginning to collapse. The Landmark contract came up for renewal in April 2021. The procurement officer sent 4 emails to Michael's business address before giving up. Michael had changed his email without updating client contacts, a disorganization that Amara would never have allowed. Uncle Chief Obi, who quietly monitored the relationship since he facilitated it, made one call to Amara's number. When she did not answer on behalf of the business anymore, he understood everything he needed to understand. Landmark moved on. Within 5 months, Michael's business shed staff like a tree in Harmattan. 8 became 5. 5 became 3. The Yarba shop was given up for a smaller space in Mushin. Suppliers who had extended credit on the strength of Landmark's name began calling in debts. The Honda Pilot, the one Michael had stood beside in the compound with his chest full of pride, was sold quietly to cover what he owed. And Stella, who arrived when the money was abundant, left when it became scarce. She did not make a scene. She simply stopped returning his calls with the same urgency. then stopped returning them at all. Michael found himself alone in a one-bedroom apartment in Mushin, staring at a business that had been reduced to rubble, wondering how everything had come apart so fast. He did not understand that he had not built anything. He had lived inside something Amara built, and when she left, the building came down. July 2021, Zara developed a fever that would not break. 4 days of high temperature that frightened Amara in a way nothing else had since the separation. Not the loneliness, not the money stress, not the silence of a house that used to have 2 adults in it. She wrapped her daughter in a blanket at midnight and took a taxi to the nearest general hospital because that was what was accessible. And Amara had long since learned to work with what was accessible rather than grieve what wasn't. The hospital was crowded and understaffed and smelled of disinfectant and waiting. She sat on a bench with Zara against her chest, smoothing her daughter's hair, whispering the same words her mother used to whisper to her. "You are strong. You are mine. You are going to be fine." A doctor appeared at the end of the corridor. He was moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been on shift too long, but was not going to show it. He stopped at the door. He looked at his clipboard, then he looked up. Amara's breath left her body. Dr. Chidi Okoro, her first love, University of Benin, 2010. 3 years of something so tender and complete that she had spent a decade trying to find its equal in other men. Settling, she now understood, for a man who could only approximate it. He saw her at exactly the same moment. For 4 full seconds, neither of them moved. Then Zara coughed and the spell broke. Chidi crossed the corridor in 7 steps, crouched down in front of them and said in the voice of a doctor, "Let me look at her." But his eyes, for just a moment, had said something else entirely. Chidi examined Zara with the focused calm of a man who had learned to keep his hands steady, even when his chest was not. He checked her temperature, examined her throat, listened to her breathing with a stethoscope. He pressed gently against her small back while she whimpered, held her hand and murmured softly into her hair. He wrote a prescription without rushing. He explained everything clearly. Viral infection, nothing bacterial, fluids and rest. The medication would handle the rest within 48 hours. "She will be fine," he said, straightening up. He looked at Amara directly when he said it, not at the clipboard, at her. "Thank you," Amara said. "You don't have to thank me." A pause. "You never had to thank me for anything, Ara." She looked at him, then really looked, and something in her chest cracked open like a window that had been painted shut for years. She pressed her lips together and nodded and looked back at Zara, because that was safer, and because she was not yet ready to feel the full weight of being seen by someone who actually knew how to look. He called her the next morning. She almost did not pick up. She sat watching her phone ring with her heart doing something embarrassing in her rib cage. And then she picked up because she was 33 years old and had survived a failed marriage alone. And she refused to be undone by a phone call. "How is she?" Chidi asked. "Better. The fever broke around 5 this morning." "Good, I'm glad." A silence, easy rather than awkward. "And you, how are you?" Amara laughed, short and involuntary. The laugh of someone who has not been asked that question sincerely in so long that the sound of it catches her off guard. "I am standing," she said. "I know you are," he said. "You were always the one who stayed standing." He did not push. He did not arrive at her door the next day with declarations or demands. He was not that kind of man, which was, she was beginning to remember, precisely what she had loved about him a decade ago. He sent a message 3 days later asking if Zara liked Puff Puff because he had passed a woman selling them near the hospital and thought of the child for some reason. Amara smiled at her phone for longer than she intended to admit. He came by that Saturday morning. He brought Puff Puff in a paper bag and a small juice box, and he sat on the floor of the living room with Zara and watched 20 minutes of her cartoon without complaint. Zara, who was suspicious of most adults, decided within 15 minutes that she approved of him. She climbed into his lap without asking, and he simply adjusted and kept watching the television, as though small children had always been part of his Saturday routine. Amara watched from the kitchen doorway with a dish towel in her hands, and felt something she had not felt in years. The particular piece of a house that has the right energy in it. It was around this time that Michael reappeared. He had heard through the collapsing network of mutual contacts that Chidi was back in Amara's life, not the full story, just enough to ignite the particular panic of a man who has discarded something and suddenly notices someone else bending to pick it up. He called first. She answered once out of fairness. "I made a mistake, Ara." His voice had lost the smoothness she remembered. It sounded worn, like fabric washed too many times. "I know I did. I've been thinking about everything. I miss my family." "I miss you." Amara sat with that for a moment, not because she was tempted, but because she was honest enough with herself to let the words land before she responded, to make sure her answer came from clarity and not from the reflexive anger she had every right to carry. "Michael," she said quietly, "what exactly do you miss?" Silence. "Because if you miss the woman who managed your books and kept your suppliers happy and called in favors on your behalf without telling you, that woman was always working. She was never resting. She does not miss that life." Another pause. "And if you miss your daughter, you know where the courts are. I will never keep Zara from her father. But I am not a door you can walk back through when the weather changes." Michael said her name once more. She waited. Then she said, gently but without any room for negotiation, "Take care of yourself." She ended the call. She sat for a moment in the silence of her kitchen. Then she exhaled, long and slow and complete. The way you exhale when you finally put down something heavy you have been carrying for so long you forgot it'd weight. He came to the house 3 weeks later. She opened the door and stood in the frame and looked at him. He was thinner. The confidence had gone out of him the way air goes out of something punctured. Not all at once but persistently until the shape of him was different. He looked at her with eyes that were genuinely sorry, and she believed that he was. Genuine sorrow, she had learned, was not the same as earned forgiveness. Michael, she said. Her voice was not cold. It was clear, which was different and somehow harder to argue with. You didn't leave me because I failed you. You left because you didn't know what you had. And I can't teach a grown man how to see. She let